The island that shouldn't exist. There are places the maps pretend don't exist, places erased not with ink but with silence, hidden from curious eyes by legends, storms, and the weight of history no one wants to remember. Mystery Island is one of them. For decades, its name surfaced only in rumors. Sailors whispered of a strange land rising from the fog like a ghost. Explorers spoke of ruins where the walls wept and the floors groaned with unseen footsteps. Historians dismissed it as myth, insisting no such place existed. But those who had been there, those rare, shaken souls, spoke of asylums built on its cliffs, institutions long abandoned, yet not truly empty. When I first heard of Mystery Island, I thought it was little more than a haunting campfire story. But stories have a way of taking root, and soon I found myself unable to resist the lure. I wanted proof. I wanted to see if the ruins were real. So I prepared. A sturdy pack, food and water, a flashlight, and my 4K camera to capture everything. But as the boat pushed through mist and the shoreline of Mystery Island finally rose from the grey horizon, I realized something unsettling. I wasn't here to find the truth. The truth had been waiting all along for me. And as the island drew closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that it already knew my name. Chapter 1. Arrival on the edge of nowhere. The sea grew restless as I neared the island, as if trying to dissuade me. Waves slammed against the hull, their foam like teeth gnashing. A storm wasn't brewing, yet the water behaved as though something beneath stirred it. When Mystery Island revealed itself through the fog, my breath caught. Jagged cliffs rose high and sharp, like the spine of some ancient beast. Atop those cliffs, silhouetted against the pale sky, was a shape unmistakable, a massive building, crumbling yet defiant. The first asylum. Landing was a trial. The pier had rotted into nothing but splinters and bones of wood jutting from the sea. I leapt ashore, boots sinking into wet sand, and looked around. No gulls cried, no insects buzzed. The island was silent, and not in the peaceful way. This was silence that pressed against your ears, as if muffling out something you weren't supposed to hear. Ahead, a narrow dirt path stretched into the tree line, half consumed by ivy and roots. I followed it, branches clawing at my jacket, the smell of earth and salt heavy in the air. Every step forward was a negotiation, curiosity urging me onward, instinct whispering to turn back. When I emerged from the trees and looked up, the asylum loomed above me. Its windows were hollow eyes staring down with accusation. A broken sign dangled from rusted chains, the lettering too faded to read. I filmed the facade in wide 4K shots, capturing its eerie majesty. And then, as I zoomed in on the second floor, I froze. In one of the shattered windows, a shadow moved. I was alone, wasn't I? If the island had been waiting, it had just made its presence known. Chapter 2. The first asylum. The door resisted my push, but with a groan like a wounded animal, it gave way. Inside, the asylum was a mausoleum of memory. Dust clung to the air, thick as cobwebs. The walls peeled in layers as though shedding their skin. Rows of rusted hospital beds lined the first room I entered, their mattresses long decayed. Metal restraints still dangled from some, swaying faintly though no wind touched them. I aimed my camera across the room, the silence so deep I could hear my own pulse. Exploring further, I found hallways that seemed to stretch unnaturally long. Some turned corners only to lead to bricked-up walls. Others looped back on themselves, impossible geometry that left me disoriented. One room chilled me more than the rest. Wheelchairs, dozens of them, had been arranged in neat rows, all facing the same blank wall. The seats were cracked, their wheels frozen in rust. Who placed them there, and why? I whispered into my recorder, "It's like the building wants me lost." That's when I heard it. A faint shuffle as though someone dragged a foot across the floor just beyond the next hallway. I spun, light cutting through the dark, but there was nothing my eyes could see. Later, when I replayed the footage, I saw it. A figure, blurred humanoid, standing at the far end of the hall, watching. And suddenly I wondered if I was exploring the asylum, or if the asylum was exploring me. Chapter 3. The Whispering Halls. Deeper in, the asylum grew stranger. My flashlight flickered as if resisting the dark. The architecture seemed nonsensical, like a maze meant to trap. I turned a corner and froze. The walls here were etched, not with graffiti from vandals, but with scratches, names, symbols, desperate marks. some etched so deeply it seemed impossible they were made by fingernails alone. A phrase repeated again and again in shaky script. "Don't let it in." My chest tightened. What was it? The asylum, the island, something worse? In one room I found old filing cabinets overturned, their drawers spilling yellowed papers. The files described patients not by name but by numbers. Notes scribbled in a doctor's hand revealed paranoia. Subject claims the island speaks to him at night. Subject refuses to sleep, insists something waits behind the walls. Subject insists there is another asylum beneath the asylum. I stuffed a few papers into my pack. Proof, evidence. And yet, as I walked away, I could swear I heard whispers, like the voices of the patients themselves, still echoing in the hallways. But the strangest thing wasn't the whispers. It was the fact they seemed to be saying my name. Chapter 4. The Records Room. The library, or perhaps a records room, was a graveyard of knowledge. Shelves lay broken, their contents scattered like bones. I picked up one book, its leather warped by water, its pages fused. But among the debris I found something intact. A folder bound in twine. Inside were journals, sketches, and reports. The sketches disturbed me most, drawings of the asylum surrounded by black, faceless figures. In some sketches, those figures weren't outside the walls but inside, looming over the patients. In the margins of almost every page, the same words appeared. "It's underneath, don't let it in." My skin prickled. Patients and doctors alike seemed obsessed with the same warning. I filmed close-ups of the drawings, my voice shaking as I narrated. And then I saw it, tucked between pages, a photograph. Grainy, black and white, but clear enough to freeze my blood. It showed the asylum hallway I had just walked through. And in the photo, standing exactly where I had stood, was the same blurred figure my camera had captured earlier. This wasn't chance, this wasn't pareidolia. Someone, or something, had been in these halls long before me, and it was still here. Chapter 5. Nature's Reclamation. Leaving the records room, I stepped into what once had been a courtyard. But it was no longer stone and benches. It had become a cathedral of nature. A massive oak tree had torn through the ground, its roots splitting the tiles, its branches piercing the roof. Shafts of light filtered through shattered stained glass, painting the weeds and moss in colors too beautiful for such a place. Flowers bloomed where once patients shuffled in despair. It was hauntingly gorgeous, and yet it unsettled me. Nature wasn't erasing the asylum, it was absorbing it, weaving it into its fabric. The ruins weren't dying, they were becoming part of the living island. I touched the bark of the tree and felt warmth, as though a pulse beat within. And then I noticed something carved into its trunk. Letters, words. "It's underneath." The same message, repeating across walls, journals, and now living wood. My stomach dropped. Whatever it was, the island was trying to tell me it hadn't been buried. It was still alive. Chapter 6. The Forgotten Wing. On the northern cliffs I found another asylum, larger, more intact. Its gates bore a rusted sign, "Quarantine, do not enter." The building exuded menace. Inside, the air was colder, damp, carrying the stench of mold and rust. Solitary confinement cells lined one hall, tiny, windowless rooms. Their walls were scarred by desperate fingers. Some words were still legible. "It's here." So I recorded everything, but my hands shook. At the far end, one cell door stood ajar. Inside, the walls were covered in frantic scrawl, circles, crosses, strange shapes that looked less like writing and more like warnings. One line was repeated in bold scratches. "It's underneath, don't go down." And that's when I found the stairwell. It descended into blackness, the air rolling out damp and foul like the breath of something ancient. I knew I shouldn't go down, but I also knew I no longer had a choice. Chapter 7. Descent into Darkness. The stairwell spiraled into the earth, stones slick with moss. My flashlight trembled as I held it, the beam slicing through suffocating black. At the bottom, tunnels stretched in every direction. They weren't made by modern hands. These were older, carved from stone, lined with strange symbols that pulsed faintly in my light. The deeper I went, the less the place felt like an asylum. It was something older, something primal. A chamber I entered bore carvings of faceless figures, identical to those in the sketches I'd found. They seemed to writhe even in still stone, as though desperate to break free. Dripping echoed from the ceilings. My camera caught glitches, distortions, and then I heard it. A sound like breathing, but too vast, too deep, as though the earth itself inhaled and exhaled. My hands clenched. The patients hadn't been insane, they had been witnesses. And now I was too. Chapter 8. Between Reality and Myth. When I finally stumbled back into the moonlight, I wasn't sure how much time had passed. Hours, days. The trees seemed taller, the asylum loomed larger, even the stars looked unfamiliar. I realized the patient's words were true. Mystery Island wasn't just a ruin, it was a threshold, a place where reality and myth blurred, where something ancient stirred beneath. I whispered the words I'd seen so many times, "Don't let it in." But as the wind shifted, carrying faint whispers that seemed to echo my own, I knew the truth. It wasn't waiting to be let in, it was already here. The secrets remain. When I rode back into the mist, Mystery Island faded behind me like a dream or a nightmare. My camera was heavy with footage. My pack was filled with journals, sketches, and evidence. But heavier still was the knowledge I carried. The asylums will continue to crumble. The island will continue to swallow them. But the truth remains, this place was never abandoned. And as I sit now reviewing the 4K footage, I see it again. That same blurred figure standing just beyond the edge of light, waiting, watching. I left Mystery Island behind, but Mystery Island has not left me, and maybe never will.